He called me his maid in front of everyone. But then our son asked why I was crying. It was supposed to be just dinner, just one polite evening with his colleagues and their spouses. I had helped organize the whole thing, reserved the restaurant, prearranged the wine list, even ironed his shirt while our son napped. I wore a simple navy dress, soft makeup, hair pulled back. Not glamorous, but I looked like myself. I sat quietly beside him as the conversations flowed, careful not to interrupt. Then someone spilled a glass of red wine, and I instinctively reached for the napkins. I bent down to help, and that's when he laughed. Loud. Careless. She's used to cleaning. She's basically my maid, he said, smirking at the table. They laughed too. Most of them. One woman didn't. But I didn't look up. I couldn't. My ears burned. My hands kept dabbing at the wine, even though it had already been cleaned. I don't know why I didn't stand. Or scream. I just froze. My husband had humiliated me, and he thought it was funny. The server glanced at me with pity. I swallowed back the lump in my throat and smiled, robotic. It's fine, I whispered. He didn't even look at me. Just kept talking about promotions and numbers and wine. I sat down again, eyes on my plate, barely breathing. I had never felt so invisible beside someone who once promised me everything. The laughter faded into clinks of cutlery. I didn't eat. I just counted the seconds until it would all be over. And then, from the end of the table, came the voice that cracked me wide open. Dad, why is she crying? Everyone froze. You could hear the sound of a fork slipping off a plate somewhere at the far end of the table. Our son, Milo, was only 6, but his voice cut through the polished tension like thunder. He was sitting 2 chairs down between the VP's wife and a junior executive who had spent the entire evening pretending he didn't exist. His little hands gripped the edge of the table, his eyes wide and fixed on me. Why is Mommy crying? He repeated, this time softer. I hadn't even realized tears had slipped past my smile, but they had, warm, involuntary, unstoppable. My husband turned to him, awkwardly chuckling. She's not crying, he said too quickly. Mommy just gets emotional sometimes. The woman beside Milo leaned over and whispered something in his ear, trying to distract him with dessert. But he didn't move. He kept staring at me, confused and sad, like something about that moment didn't match the world he thought he lived in. And he was right. My world had split in two, and he had seen the crack first. The other guests began, shifting uncomfortably. The man who spilled the wine stood to apologize again. Someone called for more champagne. The room moved on, but Milo didn't. He slid out of his chair and walked around the table to me. Quiet, steady, brave. He climbed into my lap and placed both hands on my cheeks. Did Daddy hurt your feelings? He asked. I couldn't answer. I just held him close, burying my face in his tiny shoulder, and for the first time that night, I let myself break, right there in front of everyone. I don't remember what happened in the next few minutes. I just know I stood up with Milo in my arms and excused myself from the table. My husband didn't follow. He didn't even look at me. He stayed, laughing nervously, trying to recover the moment like it hadn't shattered in front of a dozen witnesses. I walked to the restroom at the back of the restaurant and locked the door behind me. Milo sat quietly on the little bench near the vanity, swinging his legs, watching me in the mirror. My mascara had smudged. My hands were shaking. I don't like when he talks like that, Milo said softly. I looked at him. Like what? Like you're not important. I sat beside him and pulled him into a hug. I wanted to protect him from everything. From this, from me, from the weight of seeing too much too soon. But children see everything. Even what we try to bury under dinner reservations and birthday photos. I wiped my eyes and whispered, You did nothing wrong, baby. He nodded, but I knew he didn't believe it. I didn't believe it either. I had stayed in this marriage long after the warmth faded, telling myself it was for him, for stability, for family. But that night, hearing my child ask why I was crying, something shifted. I didn't want him to grow up thinking love looked like silence, or that disrespect was something women endure politely. I looked at myself in the mirror, puffy eyes, cracked voice, broken heart, and for the first time I wondered, what if leaving is actually the first way I teach him how to love? We left the restaurant before dessert was served. I told the valet I'd call a ride instead of waiting for my husband. Milo held my hand tightly the whole time, sensing the quiet storm in me. In the back seat of the car, he leaned against my arm and fell asleep before we even reached the freeway. I watched him breathe, his chest rising and falling with the kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. At home, I carried him to bed, tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and stood there for a long time watching. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. 3 messages from my husband. "Where did you go?" "You overreacted. Come back downstairs." I didn't answer. I sat on the sofa, still in my dress, and just stared at nothing. I thought about how many times I had made excuses for him. How many times I had told myself he was stressed, tired, joking. How many times I'd let him speak over me, dismiss me, laugh at me in front of others, all while smiling politely, playing my role. But tonight, he had crossed a line I didn't even know still existed. He didn't just humiliate me. He taught our son that it was normal, that love could come with laughter at someone's expense. And worse, he didn't care. I looked at the door, half expecting him to walk in and say sorry. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't. Because in his world, I wasn't his partner. I was just the background to his performance. And I was done being scenery in a story I never agreed to play. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. He came into the kitchen, kissed the top of my head, and asked if I wanted coffee. I looked at him, stunned by how easy it was for him to rewrite reality overnight. "Do you even remember what you said last night?" I asked. He blinked, then smiled casually. "Oh, that? Come on, it was a joke. You're being sensitive again." Sensitive. That word. The one he used every time I had a boundary. Every time I asked for dignity. I said nothing. Just handed Milo his backpack and walked him to the car. On the way to school, Milo was quiet, staring out the window until he whispered, "Are you still sad?" I forced a smile. "I'm okay, baby." He turned to me, eyes serious. "You can cry if you want. I won't tell." My throat tightened. I wanted to pull over and hold him forever. Instead, I squeezed his hand. "Thank you," I whispered. After drop-off, I parked in front of a cafe I used to love before everything became routine. I sat in the car for 10 full minutes, wondering how I got here. How I'd become a woman who flinched when her husband joked in public, who cried quietly in restrooms, who needed permission from a child to feel pain. I looked at myself in the mirror again, this time in daylight. And I asked the question that wouldn't leave me alone. If my son had a partner who treated him the way his father treats me, would I tell him to stay? The answer was immediate. No. So why was I? That afternoon I started packing. Not everything. Just the essentials, Milo's clothes, his favorite books, the blue blanket he's had since he was a baby. I wasn't running. I was deciding. There's a difference. For years, I had convinced myself that staying was strength, that enduring was noble. But I had confused silence with peace. And now all I could hear was the echo of my son's voice at that dinner table, asking why his mother was crying and no one answering. That image haunted me. It played in my head like a reel I couldn't turn off. I didn't want that to be his childhood memory of me, of us. My husband came home early, maybe sensing something. He stood at the doorway, confused by the half-empty drawers, the duffel bag on the floor. "Are you going somewhere?" he asked. I turned to him, calm. "I'm taking Milo to my sister's for a few days." "This again," he scoffed. "Because of one stupid comment." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I simply said, "You didn't see his face. You didn't hear your own son ask why I was in pain. And you didn't care to answer." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I walked past him, grabbed the bag, and said quietly, "If you want to fix this, you'll need to start by remembering I'm not your maid. I'm your son's mother. and he's watching everything. Then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just left, because staying any longer would have taught Milo how to disrespect a woman, by watching how his father did it. At my sister's house, everything felt quieter. Not just the rooms, but my body. The tension in my shoulders softened for the first time in months. Milo adjusted quickly, as kids do. He played with his cousins, helped set the table, asked to sleep with the hallway light on. I watched him from the doorway that first night, his little frame curled up under the blue blanket, and I whispered, "You did nothing wrong." I wasn't sure if I was saying it to him or to myself. The next morning, my sister poured me tea and didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She had seen the shift in my voice on the phone, had heard the silence between my words. "You don't have to explain," she said, "but you also don't have to go back." That sentence hit harder than I expected. I hadn't admitted it out loud yet. That going back wasn't automatic anymore. I had always told myself I'd stay for the family, for stability. But here I was, and my son was smiling, laughing, sleeping peacefully. There was more stability in this borrowed guest room than we'd had in that polished house with its cold kitchen and expensive rugs. I opened my email later that day and saw a message from my husband. "We need to talk. Milo needs his father." And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. Because, yes, Milo needs a father, but not one who makes his mother feel small. Not one who hides behind jokes. If he wanted to be a father, he'd have to start by being human first. A few days later, he showed up. No warning. Just his car pulling into my sister's driveway while Milo was in the backyard chasing bubbles. I saw him through the window, hesitant, holding a small bag and that familiar look. The one he always wore when he wanted to win, not when he wanted to understand. I stepped outside before Milo could see him. "I don't want a scene," I said. He nodded. I came to see him." I crossed my arms. To see him or to save face? He looked down at the bag. I brought his books and some of his clothes. I figured. His voice trailed off. I waited. I wanted to hear the word he never used. "I was wrong," he finally said quietly. I didn't move. I needed more than that. "I've made you feel invisible," he continued. "Like your place in this family came second to mine. Like your pain was inconvenient. And I'm sorry." I studied his face. For once, he didn't look like the man from the dinners, from the boardrooms. He looked tired, human. But sorry isn't a reset button. It's a beginning, if anything. "You said I was being sensitive," I said, "in front of our son." "I know," he whispered. "And now he thinks making someone cry is normal." He looked up, eyes red. "Can I fix that?" I didn't answer, because the truth is I didn't know yet. Not if he could fix it. But I knew that I wouldn't let him pretend it never happened. Not this time. And not at the cost of our son learning that love sounds like silence. We let him see Milo that afternoon, supervised in the living room, with cartoons playing quietly in the background and my sister reading at the table nearby. It was awkward at first. Milo stayed close to me, unsure of what to say. But kids are resilient. After a while, he showed his dad a drawing he had made, a stick figure, family holding hands. I saw my husband swallow hard when he realized he wasn't in it. "Where am I?" he asked gently. Milo tilted his head. "I didn't know if you'd be at dinner next time." The words hit like a brick. My husband smiled, but his eyes dimmed. That was the cost of one sentence, spoken in arrogance. One moment of laughter at someone else's expense. I watched as he knelt beside Milo and said, "If I come to dinner again, what should I bring?" Milo thought for a moment. Maybe flowers for Mommy, so she doesn't cry this time. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't rehearsed. It was honest, pure, and it held more power than anything I could have said in 1,000 arguments. Later, after Milo went to nap, my husband approached me slowly. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, "but I want to earn a different memory for him. One where his father doesn't make his mother feel like less." I nodded, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement, because that was the first time he saw what I had been protecting all along, not just myself, but the example our son would carry. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see it too. The following week I returned home, but not to stay, just to gather the rest of our things. I brought Milo with me so he could see that nothing was being taken away from him, only changed. My husband wasn't there. He had gone to stay with a friend temporarily, respecting my request for space. The house felt colder than I remembered. Not physically, but emotionally, like the echo of all the dinners, all the quiet arguments. All the swallowed words still lived in the walls. Milo ran upstairs to find his favorite toy, and I walked into the kitchen, the scene of so many silences. I opened a drawer and found the list I had made months ago. Things to fix, things to replace, things to ignore. I had written it after another night of being talked over. It was full of little repairs, appliances, rugs, routines. But nothing on that list said me. I stood there, reading it, realizing how often I had made myself an afterthought, a manager of chaos, a cleaner of messes I didn't make, a woman who learned how to make herself small to keep the peace. Milo came back down, toy in hand, and asked, "Are we moving, Mommy?" I knelt beside him and said, "We're moving forward." He nodded like he understood, more than I expected. We packed the car quietly. As I looked at the house one last time, I didn't feel regret. I felt relief. Because this time I wasn't leaving because I was hurt. I was leaving because I had healed enough to know I deserved more than not being laughed at. I deserved to be respected. That evening, after settling back into my sister's house, I got a message from one of the women at the dinner. The one who hadn't laughed. We had barely spoken before. She was always quiet, polished, the kind of woman who watched more than she spoke. Her message was short. I saw everything. You didn't imagine it. I hope you're okay. I stared at the screen for a while, my eyes blurring. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough to remind me I wasn't crazy. I hadn't overreacted. I had been humiliated, publicly, and someone had noticed. It's strange how one voice of quiet solidarity can soften the weight of 100 silences. I responded with a simple thank you. She replied again, this time slower. He embarrassed you to make himself feel big. It wasn't a joke. I hope you don't let him convince you otherwise. That last line stayed with me. It echoed louder than any apology my husband had given. Because she was right. That dinner hadn't been about humor. It had been about power. And power, when used carelessly, becomes cruelty. I closed my phone and sat in the living room with Milo, who was building something out of blocks. "What are you making?" I asked. "A house," he said, "but this one has no yelling." I bit my lip to hold back tears. He didn't know he was healing me with that sentence. But he was. Because maybe children don't need perfect homes. Maybe they just need honest ones. And that night, watching him play in peace, I realized that's all I ever wanted to. A few days later, my husband asked if we could go to family counseling. He didn't demand. He didn't guilt me. He simply said, "If there's any part of you that believes we're worth saving, I'll do the work." And for the first time, I believed he might mean it. But I also knew that forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. So I agreed to talk, to listen, not to return. We started sessions the following week. At first, he tried to fix things quickly, bring flowers, say the right phrases. But the therapist stopped him. "This isn't about repairing your image," she said. "This is about learning how to honor someone's dignity, especially when no one else is watching." That struck something in both of us. In one session, she asked him, "Do you know why she cried that night?" He hesitated, then said, "Because I embarrassed her." "No," I interrupted gently, "because I realized my son was watching me be disrespected, and I was letting it happen." The room fell silent. That moment became a turning point, not just for him, but for me. I wasn't fighting to save our marriage anymore. I was fighting to protect the mirror my son sees when he looks at me. Every woman who stays after being broken knows this struggle. It's not about weakness. It's about weighing hope against memory. But healing doesn't always look like reunion. Sometimes it looks like clarity, like finally seeing the cost of staying quiet and deciding your voice matters more than keeping things normal. And that's what I was finally learning to choose. My voice, even if it trembled. It's been 3 months since that dinner. We're not divorced. We're not fully together either. We're in something new, an honest space where nothing is assumed and everything must be earned. He still sees Milo on weekends. Sometimes we have dinner together, but never at fancy restaurants. Just quiet meals where everyone has a voice and no one is the punchline. He's learning. Slowly. He no longer interrupts me mid-sentence. He listens when I speak. He says thank you out loud. And when Milo spilled juice the other day and looked terrified, my husband got on his knees, cleaned it without comment, and said, "We all make messes. That's how we grow." I watched silently from the doorway, not moved by sentiment, but by growth. That's what I've come to understand about healing. It doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it comes with small, repeated choices to be better. Milo still asks about that night sometimes. "Do you remember when Daddy said that thing?" And I always answer him the same way. Yes. And we all learn something from it. Because I don't want to teach him to erase the past. I want to teach him how to build from it. He drew a picture for school last week, our family. This time we were all there. But I was standing in the middle, holding a sign that said, "Love means respect." His teacher sent it home with a gold star and a note. This drawing made me cry. Thank you. I hung it on the fridge, not as proof of a perfect life, but as a quiet reminder. Sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths. Last weekend, we were invited to another group dinner. Some of the same colleagues, same setting, even the same restaurant. My husband asked if I wanted to go. I paused before answering, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to be sure. I looked at him and said, "Only if you introduce me by my name this time." He nodded. No defense. No jokes. Just a quiet, "Of course." We went. I wore a black dress this time, simple but strong. Not to impress anyone, but to remind myself I was never invisible. When we arrived, the room shifted. Some faces looked surprised to see us together. Others avoided eye contact. The woman who had messaged me weeks ago gave me a soft smile across the table. I took a deep breath, sat down, and didn't shrink. And when someone complimented the table arrangements and asked who planned the event, my husband, without hesitation, turned to me and said, "She did. She's brilliant at everything she touches." It was one sentence, not loud, not dramatic, but it reached me. And more importantly, it reached Milo, who was sitting beside me coloring on a napkin. He looked up and grinned. Later, as we were leaving, he tugged at my hand and whispered, "You weren't crying this time." I smiled down at him. "No," I said, "I wasn't." Because this time I had stayed for the right reason, not for peace, not for image, not for the past. I stayed because respect was present in the room, because my name was spoken, and because my son finally saw his mother the way I should have seen myself all along. The truth is, I don't know what the future holds for us. Maybe we'll rebuild our marriage. Maybe we'll learn to co-parent with grace from a distance. But what I do know, what I finally believe, is that love without respect is just performance. And I'm done performing. I spent years being polite, being quiet, smoothing over his harshness with soft smiles and carefully chosen words. But it was my son's voice, his innocent, unfiltered question, that broke the cycle. Why is she crying? That single sentence shifted everything. It forced me to look at myself, not as a wife, not as a hostess, but as a woman. A woman who deserved to be seen, to be honored, not laughed at in front of strangers. I keep that moment with me like a compass. When I start to doubt, when I feel myself shrinking again, I remember how it felt to stand up from that dinner table. Not in anger, but in clarity. And I remember how Milo followed, not because I told him to, but because he knew his mother's tears mattered. That's the legacy I want to leave him. Not perfection, not silence, but truth, and the freedom to speak it, even when your voice is small, even when the room laughs. Because one day, someone will try to make him feel less. And I want him to remember the night his mother walked out and taught him, in real time, what self-respect looks like. Maybe that's what healing really is. Not getting everything back the way it was, but building something better with what remains.